Resurrected life shall appear, and to also come with him in glory. Fortify therefore your members which are upon the earth, for ye are dead, your life is hid with Christ in God.
Seek those
things above. Ye are dead, your life is hid with Christ in God.
Seek those
things above. Ye are dead, your life is hid with Christ in God.
Thank you for singing.
Okay, can I have any of you guys know how to remove this podium? Excellent. Okay, here comes some help. Great. And let's move our chairs forward. I should have specified. Yes, thank you. Good evening. How are you? Good evening. This is the hot mic. Okay, very good. We are in a very impromptu style putting together a panel discussion for you. And we're just about ready. We'll see if we need any more chairs. Let's see. We have Maboshe, Soso, good. Ladies, go ahead and have a seat. Let us take care of it. There you go. Okay. And I think we'll need one more chair for me. I'll grab it right here. Okay, we want to welcome you to Courtesy Week this evening. We have something really special here, and we're going to be talking. Do you notice anything about the people that are up front here? Thank you, exactly. Different cultures. When we talk about courtesy, we're talking about etiquette, we're talking about customs, expectations, things that may be considered polite or impolite. And in some cases, we may be talking about either extreme expectations or what we call taboos. Anybody know what a taboo is? Okay. Taboo is like something you would never, ever do in your culture. It's just no, taboo. Okay? So I've got questions that I'm going to ask this illustrious group, diverse group. And Dr. Maloney will actually be representing Poland. She's not Polish, right? But she spent some time in Poland and apparently enough time to learn some things about the culture that are interesting. So she will share. Soso, of course, representing the Karen culture or that part of Asia. Our brother Devan representing Cape Verde. And by the way, is there a mic already there? Do you have a... We're going to need this mic as well. Okay, check and see if it's hot, please. Okay, very good. And then Maboshe representing Zambia. I think Miss Minju is obvious, right? Okay. And I think Miss Henny is obvious as well. But you may or may not know that she's actually Indonesian. Okay, very good. Poland, and of course, Miss Anu is India. Very good. I may step in and represent the Caribbean culture. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But okay, so what we're going to do, please listen closely, and you may have questions too. We're going to approach several issues in courtesy and etiquette and just see what your experience is. What is it? How would your culture respond to some of these things. So our first topic is greetings. Okay, just when you approach someone and you first greet them, how do we do that here in America? Hi, how are you? And maybe a handshake, okay? Anu, we'll start with you. How do you greet in India?
Okay, in India, we say namaste. Okay, so you would hold your hand like this, fold your hand like this, and say namaste.
Okay, namaste.
Well, so it's not, especially for the opposite sex, right? So it's not necessary whether ladies meet, we would say namaste. But when a man and woman meet, so we don't really touch, so we have to say namaste. So it also depends where you are. Well, in cities, it's not like that, but if you go away to the villages, then they would prefer this than shake hand.
Now, since we have you there, and I know your husband mentioned something a little earlier, here in America, often it's a hug or something like that. Yeah. Would that happen in India?
No. So if you meet a woman, a man would meet a woman, you won't go and give her a hug. That's a total no.
Okay.
Right, so you would say namaste. That's what they would accept.
Now, notice, I want you to be thinking about something here as you consider what we're talking about. In our culture, or depending, especially in a Latin culture, right, the hug would be expected. If you don't do something affectionate, it would be considered rude, maybe, or like you don't know that person. But in her country, it's the opposite. If you were to do the hug, that would be rude, and keeping your distance would be the polite, kind thing to do. I want you to start thinking about that. Okay, very good. Anybody else? Minju, what about in Korea? Is there a special greeting?
Well, it all depends on who you are talking to. If you are total strangers, we usually bow like 안녕하십니까.
Okay.
Right. usually put your hand on the tummy and then you do like this. 안녕하세요. Right.
Wow.
But we do that too if you are older. If you're younger, we say 안녕. So, because we have a different words for elderly and younger.
Yeah. Now, this is a theme you're going to notice throughout this, that in different cultures, how you relate to age, whether young or old, makes a huge difference how the etiquette or the courtesy is played out. Okay, so that's very, very important. Anybody else that has an unusual type of, or something different than, yes, go ahead, David.
It's not necessarily unusual, but in the United States, I've seen this is not the case. A Cape Verdean, if it is like on the same age, people have 2 kisses. Yeah, and I've seen in America it's quite different. Normally when people go from here, some people give 1 kisses and the other person stays in the air like this, waiting for the second one. and it's not there. And that happens. And that happens between the opposite sex sometimes too.
Now, since we have you, I know when we talked, there was something that was very similar to my culture, and that is when, for example, you come to an elder person, or especially a family member like a grandparent or something, what typically would you do to greet them?
You would never say, "What's up? How are you?" Those things can lead you to get spanked even. But normally we say, "Give me blessings." That's what we say in Cape Verde. So you say, "Give me blessings," and they respond normally. It's very spiritual mindset. They respond with something like, "God give you health." If you're young and small, like you're just growing, they say, "Make God make you grow," something like that. It's very practical. Sometimes it can get funny, but yeah, they say anything, give you wisdom and things like that.
Right. Now, this is similar in the Caribbean culture. I don't know about the Mexican or South American, but as soon as you approach your elders, you say bendición. You're asking for a blessing. They will say, "Que Dios te bendiga," may God bless you. And then as you leave, you do the same thing. You say bendición. Now they will respond, "May God accompany you." That's standard. I mean, you just do that without even thinking. Okay, very good. And if you don't do it, again, it's rude or it's kind of not proper etiquette. Okay, very good. Let's kind of move from there. What about visiting? Let's say that you're going to go visiting a home. What typically happens? And let me start with Mabosha here first. What typically happens when somebody arrives at the house?
So in Zambian culture, if someone arrives, for example, let's say someone arrives at our house, and as a young person, you have to come downstairs and you have to greet everybody that's arrived at the house. And if you don't greet them, then you'll get in trouble. If you go to someone's house, let's say it's a woman who goes to another person's house, and especially the older males, you have to go and you do like a little towards the men. And yes, that's pretty much it for the women. And of course, as far as like for everyone else, for the males as well, you have to make sure you go and greet every single one of the elders, and you have to acknowledge them.
Okay, what about things like, and this is just general, you know, here in America, we just show up and we say hi and we just barge in, and, you know, we might say, hey, what have you got to eat, or whatever, what's going on? What is that appropriate?
So in our Korean culture, I mean, you don't have to make an appointment, you know, you can just show up at any time. But at the same time, you can just, but let's just say you come to my house, you don't go directly to, of course, not go to directly to the pot and open it to the kitchen, you know. It'd be kind of rude in that sense, you know.
Sure.
But you can come, but when you come visit us, as a host, we already expected that we're going to feed you, you know, no matter what, you know. That means you're not going empty, we're going to feed you. But when you come into the house, when I grow up, in our village, every single house have a pop-up water, a pot or a jar, in front of the house. So everybody over there do not have a shoe like this. It just wear a slipper, right? You call it?
Okay.
Yeah. So everybody feet dirty. So it doesn't matter winter or summertime. So as soon as you arrive at the house, you wash your feet and you get into the house. So most every house has a pop of water there for the visitor. You wash your feet and you come to the house, because you don't come into my house with your shoe, because you take out your shoe in a way that you show respectful.
How many in your cultures you take shoes off before you enter the home? Okay. See, quite a bit of the world is like that. The shoes have to come off. And in your case, there's a pot even there for them to wash their feet before they go in. Okay. Now, what if you're the host? In other words, you're the one that's taking on. What are some of the expectations or some of the things that you would feel, you needed to do?
Well, in Cape Verde, you have to feed a person. That's just expected as well, just like Soso's culture. We don't ask if it's a little bit after the time that you ate at your house. We don't ask anything. It's just no health reform. They don't care about anything. They just expect you to eat at their house.
Okay, because apparently the value that they give to the food is, this is how I show love to you or respect or whatever. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is it okay for people to refuse food?
It's rude in my culture. It's rude. I have found some ways to do it, but it's rude.
Okay.
For me, I mean, when I go, I cannot eat certain food that somebody goes in the back and start preparing something that I don't eat.
Right.
And I try to be very delicate with how I refuse it. But in general, it's rude.
Yeah, if we had time, we could talk about how to kind of get around that. But one of the things that someone mentioned to me, and I was talking to, I wanted a Mexican up here, but I couldn't get anybody up here because too busy working, right? Judith, you want to get up? Come. We'll take a Mexican if we can. Come on up. Okay. Sister, okay, come on, vaya. Look at that. Okay, we're ready. Okay, good, Miss Nivea. I think we got somebody. Okay, so I remember in our little discussion that if the food is offered, then and you tell me if I'm right, Miss Nivea, that essentially you let them put it on the plate, but you don't have to eat it. Is that right?
That's right. It's rude to not take it. So you can still put it on the plate, and if they want to eat it, they can. If they don't have to.
Okay, right. So when they lay that lobster on there or, whatever it is, just say thank you very much, but yeah, you don't have to touch it. Oh, thank you. Yes, please spread those right across. Okay, moving right along here. Also the gifts, the idea of gifts. Sometimes there's gifts that are given or expected. Food traditions. Let's talk about food traditions. Who wants to talk about food traditions? I know back to David, you mentioned, Maboshe. You talked about this special food that is very traditional.
Yes, in Zambian culture, they have something called nshima. And nshima is basically like cornmeal. So when you take cornmeal and you boil it inside of water, it gets thicker and thicker. And you keep adding cornmeal until it gets really, really thick. And you can mold it to be like a lump. It might be known as Nigerian fufu. You might have seen that before. And nshima is like the starch, and you eat that with beans or vegetables or meat if you eat meat. And yeah, it's a finger food.
I was going to say, do you notice what he's doing here? Okay, so it's a communal thing, and the idea of, for some Americans, the idea of communal food is like, absolutely out of, order.
Yes.
But in your culture, it's a way of showing commonality and community, right?
Indeed. And also, if in Zambian culture, they usually say if you're Americanized, you eat rice. So usually when you come to Zambian families in America, you'll usually find the adults eating the nshima and the young people are all eating rice because they're not used to eating nshima.
Now, please someone get a microphone to Dr. Maloney, because she was telling me, and it was so funny, so cute, about in Poland. Tell us about lunch, how lunch works.
I don't know. Oh, yeah. So I went to work in a lab in Poland, and they had a communal lunch. So it wasn't really optional. I didn't feel like it was optional to bring my lunch. Instead, there was this big kind of offering bowl. And so you needed to bring a food item and place it in this bowl. And you had to discuss it the day before. I see the radishes are getting low. Okay, I'll get some radishes tomorrow. Oh, I'll bring a pepper. So it was really important to contribute to the lunch together. But that meant that every day you had to eat the same lunch. It was always the same thing. So it was a sandwich with like vegetables, and some people would have sliced meat or sliced cheese, and then pickles. And that was the lunch every day in my lab. And I noticed that other labs did the same thing. And so everybody eats the same lunch, and they all bring one thing for the lunch. So it was really unusual for me because some days I just wanted to bring my own lunch, but it seemed like it wasn't part of the etiquette. So every day I would bring something and place it in the bowl, and then we would work together to make these sandwiches. So it was really interesting.
So imagine that, it's lunch, and instead of running off to, Taco Bell or this place or that to, satisfy yourself, you are bound, culturally, etiquettely bound for the bowl, right? The communal bowl. And they expect it and they like it, and that's life. They would not think any other way. That's the way to do it. How many meals a day, by the way, would they eat there?
6 meals. Yeah, first breakfast, second breakfast, and then it's actually called that as śniadaniu and drugi śniadaniu. And then there's lunch, and then there's afternoon tea, then there is dinner, and then there's supper. 6. I mean, it's pretty amazing sometimes, but sometimes it can be a little exhausting. Yeah, 6 meals.
So in terms of other traditional foods, does anybody else, or traditional food practices like that? Can any of you think of anything? Yes, okay.
Host, right? So in our culture, if you are a guest, we will treat you a little bit extra. What I mean by that, let's just say you come to my house, but as our family, we will eat a regular meal. But since we have a guest, we go extra mile. Let's just say if you eat, let's just say you eat chicken, right? So but in our meal, it might not be regularly. We might not even once a month. But since you come to our house, we're going to cook it for you because you are here. So we treat guests special. Then, of course, you treat your family special, but as a special guest, you treat them a little different.
Okay.
And for the food is in our Korean, almost every single house where you go, you will eat it. It is a dagapok. We can see it. I don't know how to say it in Korean, in English. Almost like a rice porridge, yeah. But it's different. It cooked with many, but every single house has it because it go to the history. Because back at the time, when people don't have a rice, because you can put a little bit of rice when you started boiling it, and then you put many different kind of veggie, so the whole house can eat it, just little rice, So they call it dagapok. It's everybody eat it. It's different, yeah.
Now, and I'm going to bring in something else, and then we're going to move on to dress, okay? But Maboshe, I think you especially had expressed this, but it came out in several cultures. When you serve food, who eats first? In our culture, typically you're going to feed the children and get them satisfied, and then so forth. How does it work in Zambian culture?
So in Zambian culture, the men eat first. So let's say the fathers and the uncles,
calm down.
They eat first. So I'll give you an example. I remember we went to a Thanksgiving dinner with lots of Zambian families came together. All of the dads ate. They got their food first, and then the kids, and then after that, the women would eat after that.
Okay,
the moms would eat after that, shall I say.
Right, and then go ahead, mention about that as well. Listen to what Soso had to say about that.
Okay, in our culture, so the father is the household, but
head of the house.
Head of the house. So that means the father, as a parent, as a kid, as maybe a mother, and as a children, you don't eat first. But when you eat, for example, if you are trying to eat in front earlier than your parents, especially your father, you will get a bowl. You will separate. You're gonna, especially the rice. You will cut off the first spoon that you're gonna take out, and you're gonna put it special for your dad. And the curry, you're gonna take it off. This is for your dad because you know that they are older than, not just older than you. Because you're parents. So as a respectful way, so that you just special for them. But if we were eating together, let's just say we're sitting together on the table. So the first spoon, the first spoon of the curry, you're gonna put in front of your father. You're gonna put it in your father's plate. So it's showing that this is a respectful way. You don't eat in front earlier than your father if you're eating together, to respect your elder.
Now that may sound very unusual, but very close to home, Nivea. How does it work in the Mexican culture, and it's true in the Caribbean culture, as Puerto Rican culture?
Yeah, in the Mexican culture I grew up, we serve my father, and then the brothers sit and the women serve. That's how I grew up.
Yeah, typically in Puerto Rican culture, often the women don't even sit with the men. They're in and out of the kitchen serving, and when they've fed and so forth and so on, then the women will sit and eat and so forth. Now, are you noticing something here? I know that it may seem like kind of a total opposite of what you're used to. However, within those culture, those norms, those etiquettes work. They express love, they express respect, they express solidarity, stability, tradition, all these good things, even if they may be very different than what you're used to. Okay, we've got to move through this. Dress. Wow, who wants to talk about dress? Oh, Polish. What you mentioned about the colors that they use? No.
When students are going to take a test, it's very important that they wear a very specific outfit. So for guys, that would be a white formal shirt, a black jacket, and black pants. And I mean like formal, like you're going to a formal dinner. And this is to take any exam, and that's to show respect for your teachers, your examiners. Yeah, and I think also the dress for success principle probably, but it's a tradition. So girls need to wear the same thing, so a white shirt, black jacket, and a black skirt. So you can see on the bus in the morning the students who have a test that day because you can see they're wearing the uniform. And also they go on their way to school. You see lines of students going into the church to pray before their test, and then they're coming back out, and they, yeah.
Wow, imagine that.
But yeah, it's about respect, respect for your teacher.
Okay, Miss Henny, in Indonesia, you can live on the same island, and yet there may be, how do people dress?
Well,
It's on, yeah.
For a certain event, usually they use a traditional dress, and in Indonesia we have a lot of different kind of traditional dress. So even in Java Island, from west to the east, they have a different, and the language also different. So but the national dress in Indonesia it's made of batik.
Batik, yeah.
That's usually now when they have an event like wedding, a lot of people using that.
So batik is kind of like tie-dye, at least it has that look.
Yeah, it's not like tie-dye though.
No.
Actually, you use the wax and it's called chanting, and then you draw it, the handmade, okay? You draw it, the line, and
Wow.
give the color, and it's different, yeah. And there is also with the stem, so you can use the stem. So there is the handwriting one.
Patterns you
with
make,
the hand,
okay.
yeah. There is also with the stem.
Super. She was mentioning to me that on the island, you have tribe, and they're all going to wear their traditional dresses to distinguish from each other and so forth. Interesting. Now, somebody was mentioning to me about a married woman, the color of dress that a married woman wears. Who is that? Yes, so.
So in a Korean tradition, so man and woman, they will have a same like this, but it's longer, until here, until your ankle. So it covers your whole body. For as a woman, if you're a singer, so you wear a long white one. But when you get married or you engage, but especially when you get married, the colors change. You will have black, and then you have a different
Pattern?
There's a pattern, but the same that they will put a little, I don't know what it is called, but in English we call it a penna. So they put it on there. It's a little, almost like a bead, but they make a whole.
A pennant or beads, okay.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So it's recognized them as the married. So you know that right away. Oh, if they have a black collar of a Korean shirt, this is represent she's already married. She's already been chosen. But if she wear a different color and long one, so she's available. Yeah.
Okay. Now, guys, by the way, and we'll just kind of go right down the line here. When a proposal is made for marriage, what do you have to do? Is there anything interesting or special? A dowry? Who gets the dowry? Who gives the dowry in your cultures?
Well, there's a quick thing I can mention on that as far as about Cape Verde. One thing they do check, it's kind of like here in that sense. There's only one thing that might change. The thing about giving is it's not so much like they just check your abilities. If a man can work to support, that's one thing that parents are really worried about. And they will check on that.
So they may check on how many cows he has.
Exactly.
Something like
so
that.
Exactly. And then they tell their daughters. But the other thing is a man would never approach a parent to ask for the daughter. You have to send a representative. And normally it's somebody that's older. That way it's kind of like you don't go as somebody that's not in their level to approach them. Not in their level, not because they're more important, but you're younger and they're older. So the level of respect, as it is defined there, is normally you send like an uncle, maybe what we call the godfather, and things like that. They would go and say, so-and-so is interested in your daughter. They would like to marry her.
Kind of like a seasoned negotiator.
Exactly. So there is a mediator.
Yeah, speaking of that kind of respect, I know Soso was telling me that you know, a younger person would never look an older person in the eye when you're talking to them. You kind of look away or so forth, out of respect, to show respect. Now, Henny, back to you, because you mentioned what it is that during the courtship and so forth, what is it typically that an Indonesian man would bring? Or
Well, it's depend too from which tribe are you from.
Okay.
Well, in my culture, usually when the man trying to propose, the parents goes to the parents of the woman, and then they bring kind of like clothes, shoes, jewelry, or those kind of things.
you mentioned, I think, a tray
Yeah,
with
on the tray.
all kinds of. Can you imagine this stacked tray? You're coming to propose, and you have all these goodies on the
It's a
tray.
small tray, so each person will gonna bring it to them and exchange with the man.
Okay.
So that's what it is.
Very good, very good. Weddings and funerals, let's see, we talked about that. There are some of cultures where, you know, in America here, the tendency is, you know, you send a little card, you send flowers, but you don't crowd the families. In some of your cultures, you go and you spend 7 days. You basically move in for 7 days, and that's how you show love and support. Which culture was that? Okay.
So, in the Zambian culture, when someone passes away, it's very traditional. If it's, for example, if it's a woman who's lost a family member, all of the friends of that woman will come and spend time with them throughout that week. So they'll come, they'll bring food, they'll sing songs, and they'll mourn with them, and they'll weep with them, they'll comfort them, and they'll encourage them just to be there for the person while they've lost a family member.
Okay. Anything anew, any customs there in India?
Yeah, when someone dies, well, we make sure that we send some food to them, and we also go and visit them. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Okay. Okay.
When it comes to funerals, yeah.
Yeah.
Because my mom, it is very important. My mom always said that if you can't go for a wedding, that's okay, but never miss a funeral. Yeah. that is important.
Now, and Anu, you know, here typically we bury people in caskets. What's a typical way in India? Say, for example, if it's Hindu, if they're Hindu.
Yeah, if it's Hindu, well, they cremate them. Okay, they burn them. That's how they do it.
On a kind of a pyre,
Yeah,
a mound?
Yeah,
not in
well,
an
nowadays they have this, this machine. They would just, you just get the ashes out. But yeah, traditionally they would put this big logs of wood, and they would put the body there, cover it, and then they would put again more logs over it. And I think that's how they do it.
oven. Yeah, sometimes they even let it out in the water, like the Ganges
Yeah,
River.
and then they collect the ash, and then they would put it out in the holy rivers that they consider like Ganga and Yamuna.
Okay. Now, I want to thank this panel for your sharing. Here's my last question for you, okay? What are some do's and don'ts, the taboos, okay? I know that the Quran have a taboo. There's certain things you don't do. What was one of the or two of that we talked about? Remember about pointing with the feet, having to do with the feet.
So, for example, here, let's just say if I were sit down let's just say on the street there in the hallway, now culture, step over people is very rude. Especially if a female step over, even more rude. It's very rude, You don't step over people. Even if you and I talking, Pastor Sam and I are talking right now, and we are in the way, and you most likely to ask them, can I go behind you? You don't go between them. But if you go between them, you ask them, okay, I'm going to go between you, and then you bow down and walk. I bow down as a respect. You don't go just hey, let me just walk straight. It would be no. It'd be very disrespectful. You bow down, you walk.
Okay, that reminded me a little bit, Ms. Nivea, about Mexicans saying that, for example, in Florida, our brother Hector was completely confounded because in Mexican culture, if two people are talking, you don't interrupt them.
That's
You
right.
don't
Right.
kind of, hey, what's going on? But then the Cuban culture is the exact opposite. You come in and you just barge in, and it's one big party, so to speak. That's
right.
Caribbean culture. And so that's a big difference between Caribbean and Mexican. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Other taboos. Can you think of a taboo? Yes, go ahead.
In Zambian culture, you never call an adult by their first name. So even if they tell you, my name is, for example, my mom's name is Beatrice Makessa. So even if she says, yeah, my name is Beatrice, you don't say Miss Beatrice, you say Miss Makessa.
And there was one culture in which I spoke with, go ahead, yes.
Yeah, so in our Indian culture, we do not call anybody who is elder to us by their name. So if it's like really elder to us, like our parents' age, then we would say uncle and auntie, which that's why if I ask my girls to call somebody uncle and auntie, it's over here is like, well, I'm not your mom's sister, I'm not your dad's, brother or so, but it's a more respect. We're sort of giving that person a place next to our parents because they're basically like our parents' age, maybe a little elder or younger. So we would address them saying uncle and auntie. But if we consider them really close, like family. But if it's somebody else, we'd say Mr., Mrs., or Sir, or Ma'am. Okay, we would not call them by their name. And even if they're just few months elder to us, we would still use a word that says respect, like elder brother and elder sister. Okay, so that's why you will hear my daughters calling their elder sister as Akka. Okay, so they say Anjali Akka or Sonali Akka. Akka means big sister. Right, so whether if it's we have so many languages. We have around 29 states, and every state has a different language.
Wow.
And so different language, different dresses. And so if you're addressing an elder person, in that language you have a word, especially for an elder brother, or a mother's like uncle and auntie. Again, in Hindi, our national language is Hindi. So if we have to call our dad's father, we would say chacha, and for mom's brother, we would say mama. Okay. So we don't really have to necessarily call them uncle and auntie. Uncle and auntie, we would refer to anybody who is nearing our parents' age.
Okay.
So we won't call them by name.
Yeah, you've probably noticed, and I'm going to kind of spell this out for you. Some cultures are what we call patriarchal. In other words, the elder, or especially the men, may hold the highest place of respect. Some are matriarchal, where the mother holds. I know in the Caribbean culture, in Puerto Rican culture, the taboo, the worst thing you can do is say anything bad about somebody's mother. I mean, those are fighting. Yeah, you don't, unless you want a duel or something really bad to happen, you don't say anything about somebody's mother, okay? And so there's different strokes for different folks. Go ahead. We're going to wrap this up.
In Cape Verde, a very simple thing in America is a no-no. If, let's say, somebody comes and say, oh, my boss, that's a nice shoes. And then so responds, oh, I gave it to him. In America, that's common and normal. In Cape Verde, that's the most rude thing you can ever do. If you give somebody something, you will never say, I gave it, especially if it was food. You just don't do it. And another one is if the adults are speaking, like you were saying, children disappear. You just don't sit there and listen. And if you sit there, all they will do, the parents just look at you. And you just read a whole book in that one look.
You know what that is. Yeah, and our culture here tends to be, instead of patriarchal or matriarchal, I don't know what word to use, but our culture tends to be youth-oriented. In other words, we adore children, we idolize them, we spoil them, and so forth. And in other cultures, no, that's not the value. The value is to respect those that are before you and so forth. So also we have, for example, in some cultures, reaching out the hand is the appropriate thing. Now, I'm reaching out my left hand. In some cultures, that would be offensive to reach out and touch someone with your left hand because, anyway, I won't get into the details for it. Yes? What's that? If you're left-handed, you have to be sensitive. Now, when I went to India, and I am left-handed, my tendency was to use my left hand, and I was told, don't worry, they'll understand you're a foreigner and you're left-handed. But within the culture, there's things you don't do, because sometimes it has history. For example, the left hand is the hand that is used to wipe, okay? Are you with me? Do I need to say any more? Okay. And so you don't use the left hand in touching other people, even though we live in a very sanitary, society, okay? In some cultures, if you were, for example, in my culture, Puerto Ricans, if I were to go like this to you, okay, you would know that I'm asking you, what'd you say? What was that? Okay? But in another culture, that would be totally offensive, okay? Or in Puerto Rican culture, you typically would not point. You'd go like this. Different strokes for different folks. Go ahead, Anu. I think you were going to.
That would be a big no in India. You can't do that.
Yes. And of course, certain things that we say as well. We could talk about language. In England, here we use the term bugger a lot. Oh, what a bugger he is. If you say that in English, in England, that is absolutely one of the worst things, the most offensive thing that you could say. Now, what do we take home from all of this? We're talking about etiquette. We're talking about being polite. We're talking about showing love and respect. And as you can see, at times, things that may for one culture be one way may be the opposite for another. What's kind of our take home from that? Let me suggest two things. Number one, I think it helps us see the importance. If you care about people, if you really care about people, then you have to extend yourself and try to understand them, right? Especially if you're going to go to their country or kind of work within their framework. It makes sense to try to understand them and so forth. Does that make sense? Number two, there are a lot of things that are really relative. In other words, in the big scheme of things, whether I, know that I'm supposed to do this or not, that may not make me or break me as a person for the kingdom of heaven. Okay? Some things are relative. But the third point that I'd like to leave you with is this, and maybe in the form of a question: Does heaven have an etiquette? Does heaven have a heavenly culture? Something that is going to be true forever and always. Something that would be, that as far as our Creator is concerned, who designed us and knows our emotions and our being, our bodies, and so forth, is it possible that there are some things that we should learn and take to heart that would be true for all people? And is it maybe important for us to learn what heaven's etiquette is? What do you think? Can we agree on that? Okay, let's bow for prayer, shall we? Let's kneel together. Oh Lord, as we have learned and kind of listened and at times smiled and maybe even said, oh, I don't know about that. We see that your children, there are so many different ways and approaches. Some are similar, some are not. But we see the need to care for each other by extending ourselves, by getting outside of our own little comfort zone and understanding that there are different world cultures and world views that it would be good for us to understand. Perhaps some of us may also need to learn and understand that what we think is so important is maybe not as important as we think it is. And then finally, Lord, we're interested. We're interested in understanding what really, truly is most important, what really, in your eyes, oh Lord, would show love, respect, and dignity, and politeness, and so forth. And so, Lord, we commit ourselves to go to your word and to transcend the cultural differences and to seek those things which truly are most important. Guide us in this process, we pray, and thank you in the meanwhile for the joys, the experiment, the trials and errors that we will have getting along now. Is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.